Aloha, boys and girls. We are back for another chapter in the novel Jeremy Thatcher, Dragon Hatcher, written by Bruce Coville. And we finished chapter 6, where we learned that Jeremy named, or perhaps the dragon wanted to be named, Tiamat. And also at the very end of the chapter, Specimen, his friend, came over, which he calls Spec, and Jeremy tested out if Specimen could see the dragon, but he could not. So he wants to try to take him back to S.H. Eli's magic shop to see if they can go there. And that's where we left off on chapter 6. So now we start chapter 7, and this one is called Still Life. Okay. Jeremy and Spess wandered around for nearly 2 hours without finding a trace of Mr. Eli's shop. It seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. "Come on, Jeremy," said Spess at last. "I'm getting tired." Back at his house, Jeremy tried the phone book, but he found no listings for Eli's magic supplies, not even in the yellow pages. When he dialed information, the operator said, "I'm sorry, sir, but there is no such business." "What's so important about this place anyway?" asked Specimen. Jeremy couldn't figure out a way to explain without telling Spess things he shouldn't. Because they were both tired, this led to an argument. "Fine," shouted Specimen. "Next time, take Mary Lou with you." Grabbing a pile of art supplies he had loaned Jeremy the week before, he stormed out of the room. Yikes. "Great," thought Jeremy glumly. "Now even my best friend is mad at me." Tiamat poked her head over the edge of the sock drawer. A comfortable swirl of yellow flowed into Jeremy's mind. "But then, maybe I've got a new best friend," he thought with a smile. He decided to read some of the book Miss Priest had given him. Unfortunately, it seemed to have vanished in the general chaos of the room. "Just my luck," he groaned, throwing himself on the bed. Couldn't find it. "I don't want to go to school," he said with his mother, when his mother set a fried egg in front of him on Monday mornings. We've skipped ahead. Poking a hole in the yolk, he watched the yellow goo ooze across his plate. "Can't say as I blame you," said his father. "School is a repressive institution aimed at subduing the masses. Still in all, it's easier to send you than to have you underfoot. So, off you go." "Herb," cried Mrs. Thatcher, "that's a terrible thing to say." "It's a sad thing, but true," warbled Jeremy's father, reaching for the blueberry granola. He began pouring the cereal into his Roy and Trigger bowl and added, "But then, life's tough, isn't it, Jer?" Jeremy nodded glumly and tried not to squirm when his mother put her hand on his forehead. "You haven't got a fever," she said, sounding relieved. "My diagnosis is Monday morning osis." We've had those, haven't we? "I'm afraid your dad is right. About going, that is," she added, giving Dr. Thatcher a sharp look. Jeremy finished his egg and trudged out of the room. He didn't care about repressive institutions, and he certainly didn't plan to be underfoot. But he did have 3 very good reasons for wanting to stay home. The first was to remain with Tiamat. The second was to avoid Howard, Freddie, and Mary Lou. The third was to turn his room inside out looking for Miss Priest's book. "At least the milk trick is working," he thought, as he went out the door. With that bowl of milk inside her, Tiamat should doze all day. Actually, his main concern now was the rate at which she was growing. Her head, which had been no bigger than his thumb when she hatched, was already the size of a lemon. He wandered along the sidewalk, wondering what new horrors the day might hold. For one bright moment, he thought that if last Friday's humiliating scene with Mr. Kravitz had been the worst moment of his life, maybe from here on in the things would get better. Somehow, he doubted it. "Hey, Jeremy!" cried Spess, as Jeremy, still wrapped in gloom, trudged along the sidewalk in front of the Bot Hill home. "Wait up!" Jeremy smiled as Spess came bumbling down the front steps of his house. At least his friend was talking to him again. But before they really started to feel comfortable with each other, they heard a shrill whistle. Turning, they saw Martha Colgan standing at the corner. Taking a silver coach's whistle from her lips, she screamed, "Mary Lou, I found Jeremy! He's over this way!" Oh no. Uh-oh, said Specimen. Looks like you'd better. But Jeremy was already gone. Sprinting for all he was worth, he ran the entire distance to school. He knew he would be safe once he reached his homeroom. Their teacher, Mr. Siegel, didn't put up with that kind of nonsense. Time has lapsed. Unfortunately, there were times in the school day, when Mr. Siegel wasn't around. Howard Morton, who had seen Jeremy's mad dash from Mary Lou, started making loud, wet kissing noises every time Jeremy walked past him on the playground. Ew. Even worse, Mary Lou told some of her friends that she was going to Jeremy's house for dinner that weekend, with the result that by the time Friday rolled around, people were chanting Jeremy Thatcher and Hot Stuff Hutton, the romance of the century, every time they saw him. Ugh, how awful. Jeremy was so tired of the whole thing that he began to wish Tiamat was big enough to start eating some of the people who were really bugging him. At least Spess hadn't gone over to the enemy camp. When Howard made his kissing sound at Jeremy as they were walking into art on Friday afternoon, Spess whispered, "Maybe you should just punch him out." "What a great idea," replied Jeremy. "Heck, he's only 1.5 feet taller than me." Specimen looked hurt. "Well, at least he would know you were serious." "Specimen, the day Howard takes me serious, I'm in real trouble." They had to stop talking then because Mr. Kravitz had lumbered to the front of the room. "Today, we are going to draw still lifes," said the teacher. He directed their attention to a small round table that held 2 oranges, a banana, and a tall blue water jug. After Mr. Kravitz had spent some time telling them what a wonderful job he had done in arranging the items, he passed out paper and said, "Start drawing." Jeremy began to sketch, slowly at first, then with the growing enthusiasm. Soon, he was so involved with what he was doing that he didn't notice Mr. Kravitz standing behind him. He jumped when the gruff voice said, "Perhaps you don't understand me, Mr. Thatcher. We are drawing still lifes today, in particular that still life." He gestured to the table in the middle of the room, then to Jeremy's picture. The banana and the oranges looked fine, but instead of the blue jug, Jeremy had drawn a small dragon trying to eat one of the oranges, which was bigger than its head. There's a little picture in the classroom. I don't know if that's Specimen or classroom or not. "That is not still life," said Mr. Kravitz, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "In fact, it is not based on any kind of life at all. I did not ask you to use your imagination today. I asked you to use your eyes, to draw what you see." Jeremy wanted to say, "This is what I see. It's what's inside me." But before he could find the courage to speak, Mr. Kravitz slapped his hand against his desk. "I want fruit," he roared. "Fruit, Thatcher, not imaginary animals." "But it's not—" Jeremy stopped himself. What was he going to do? Tell Mr. Kravitz the dragon was real? Even if he did tell about Tiamat, no one else could see her. "Try again, Thatcher," said Mr. Kravitz, handing Jeremy a fresh sheet of paper. Jeremy sighed. When he wanted more paper, he couldn't get it. When he was happy with what he was doing, Mr. Kravitz took it away and told him to start over. He considered adding Mr. Kravitz to the next drawing. After all, the man was shaped like a pear. He decided the joke would be more trouble than it was worth. Reluctantly, he picked up his pencil and started to sketch. He was blocking in the banana when a jolt of pain surged through his head. He cried out in shock, his hand jerking out of control and knocking a box of charcoal sticks across the table. "Hey!" cried Specimen, as the brittle sticks of charcoal went cascading over his drawing. "Watch it!" Jeremy barely heard him. Something was wrong with Tiamat. Uh-oh. Glancing up, he saw Mr. Kravitz heading in their direction. He looked angrier than ever. "No time to worry about that. I'm gonna throw up," he yelled, jumping to his feet and heading for the door. That would slow Mr. Kravitz down. Everyone knew he hated it when kids puked. Dashing into the hall, Jeremy raced for the back door of the school and started across the playground. He didn't really need to throw up, by the way. He was just saying that. Realizing he was more apt to be spotted that way, he changed direction, taking the longer route down Cherry Street toward the park. By the time he reached the park entrance, his lungs felt like they were little men inside scrubbing them with sandpaper. But he kept running. Gasping for breath, he stumbled up the front steps of the house, fumbled with the key, threw open the door, and shot into the living room. To his surprise, everything was quiet. He had expected chaos, an ongoing uproar, but the house was silent. Even the bounding enthusiasm of grief was missing. Stopping to catch his breath, Jeremy suddenly realized that the sense of panic and danger filling his head had faded. He had been so wound up in trying to get home, he had not noticed the ebbing of the crisis, meaning it had gone away. The ebbing of the crisis until now. The searing pain created by his desperate sprint had blocked any sendings he might have received from Tiamat. He started up the stairs, but a soft whine stopped him. Turning, he saw that it came from Grief, who was cowering under the dining room table. What's been going on here, he wondered. Where's Tiamat? The instant he thought the question, he sensed the dragon's location. It wasn't anything as simple as a message saying, I'm here. He just knew where he was. Bounding up the stairs, he stopped at his door, appalled by the mess that greeted him. His room, never very neat at its best, looked like a hurricane had just passed through. The general clutter that usually hid the floor appeared to have been whipped around with a giant egg beater. The covers had been pulled off his bed. Anything that could be tipped over had been. An indignant squawk drew his attention to Tiamat. She was perched on top of the bookshelf, glaring down at him angrily. However, the feeling he was picking up from her was not anger with him, but at the world in general. What is it? He asked gently, picking his way across the debris-covered floor. What's wrong, Tai? Tiamat opened her mouth and hissed. Jeremy drew back for a second, then stepped forward again. The dragon that looked different than she had that morning. Lighter somehow, as if someone had polished her scales. Suddenly he spotted something that looked like a piece of red cellophane lying on the bookshelf. That's that clear, almost plastic that sometimes gets wrapped around presents. Your skin, he said breathlessly. You've shed your skin. Holding out his hand, he invited Tiamat to climb onto his shoulder. She was partway up his arm when Jeremy heard a noise that startled him. He spun around so fast that Tiamat had to grab his sleeve with her teeth to keep from falling off. She sent him a flash of angry purple to let him know she didn't appreciate that kind of sudden movement. Jeremy ignored the sending. He was too upset by what he saw. And that's the end of chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will post chapter 8 soon. Have a great day. Aloha. I wonder what he saw.